working in gas stations frying chicken, right? I literally wish I knew professionals Googled more than probably the public realizes, because I was beating myself trying to memorize every single piece of syntax, thinking, oh, only a beginner probably Googles this stuff. People with experience in the field aren't Googling. One of the best lessons I ever learned was my first week in my first job in tech, where I went to this developer has over 20 years experience at this company. They knew the code base like the back of their hand. I had a ticket that I knew nothing about and I couldn't figure out. I was stalled and I was stuck on it for a couple hours without making any progress. And I went to them saying, hey, I'm really trying to get past this. Do you know how to do this? And they looked at it and they said, nope. And they started Googling right in front of me. I literally had like the biggest mind explosion at that time, because like, why was I doing this to myself? But it was because I thought genuinely that experts must code things without even thinking about it. And I think a lot of that illusion comes from like even looking at YouTube tutorials where they're coding out full applications, not realizing that they may have made the roadmap or made that dummy app before they even started pressing that record button. And I wish I knew that beforehand.
That's such a great point about memorization, Danny, because coming from the theater world, I literally memorized everything, like memorized my lines, memorized choreography. And it was a huge light bulb moment when one of the TAs at Hackbright said to me, well, how are you studying? Like, we'd had homework every weekend. I was like, well, I read the notes and I read the lecture over and over. And they're like, no, 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 no. You need to actually do the exercises, feel, like literally feel the code in your body. So like once I thought of it more like choreography in a sense that like, oh, I can't just read this chapter and know how to code. I have to actually physically do this and get it to connect in my brain. That really, really helped me as far as like how I was studying and how I was learning. So couldn't agree more on the memorization element of it.
On
Yeah.
a similar note, one of my first jobs was tiny agency. There was like two developers, so we're usually just given a full website to go and build on a small CMS. So it's kind of just us solo building something out. And there was a job opportunity that came up that I was looking at with Nike or something like that. And when I started thinking about it, I was like, I looked at their website and was like, I can't build this. I can't build the Nike website. There's no way I could ever do this job. This is just assumption that you would go in and like do the entire thing. And just recognizing that when you join, especially a larger team, you're part of the team. You're not going to be expected to do everything or know everything or be able to do everything. You're part of the team that makes it happen. And you'll be doing a small part of it and being ramped up and supported throughout the whole process. And you don't have to go build the whole website. Don't worry about that.
Ashley is raising her hand.
I really like that we have this hand raising feature. I don't remember this from last time, so if we could all use it, that would be amazing. I really do think it's really important what Danny just said. But before we get into that, a couple of other people just joined, so I want to make sure that Val and Jamila have time to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Ashley.
Hey, I'm Val. I, I also have a theater background like Chloe. I was a stage manager for a long time. It's what I went to school for. Thought that I had a conservatory degree. I was going to do theater for the rest of my life. And then I didn't. And it's actually been, I'm in marketing now and started out in events, theater to events, events to marketing. And I find more and more people in marketing that have theater backgrounds. And I like to joke that like, oh yeah, you don't use my degree at all anymore, but I actually do. I use it every single day. Um, I was, in and I went to school when there wasn't software for theater. So, there's a lot of like very using all different areas of your brain and thinking strategically about things that had to happen because we didn't have software to do things for us. And now, obviously that lift is lighter on that side of things, but having that theater background and being able to come into things differently than people who are traditionally trained in marketing or communications or PR, I think is actually a really big advantage in my career, both as a consultant and now in-house in marketing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamila. I come to tech from a hospitality and restaurant background. So gone everything from cleaning rooms, toilets to cooking food. And then I think and I also have a degree in hotel restaurant management. Um, I think one of the things that definitely helped me having that background is dealing with people in tech is not necessarily any different. As far as if you've dealt with angry guests or angry patrons or in retail, then you can pretty much do anything.
This is an absolutely fantastic segue because the next question that I had actually were, what's something you use from your previous job that has surprised you that helps you in your new role? What kinds of skills have transferred for you that you wouldn't have necessarily expected?
I think when I was planning my first meetup, I had a monthly meetup series when I worked over at Sentry. I went into it initially being like, oh my gosh, I've never put together a technical meetup. How do I do this? But I quickly realized, like, oh, all of these skills that I had from self-producing my own shows and cabaret and all this stuff in college that before I went into my boot camp, I just kind of went like, well, that was a waste of time. I spent like, however much money on a 4-year degree for theater, and now I'm never going to use that again. And it turned out that everything from like, just like Val was saying earlier, and I think I mentioned the last time we had a Twitter Spaces on this, stage managers are basically PMs. So there were so many parts of my theater degree and my experience of just being like an actor who had to do their own marketing and personal branding for myself that just so easily transferred over to a developer evangelist role when I first started. And yeah, in a lot of ways, I feel like those things that I was like, well, that was a waste of my time, really ended up being my superpower, especially public speaking.
As a couple of tiny housekeeping things, reminder to folks to use the hand raising function. Currently, the stack is Ashley, Danny, Tim, and Micah. Also, if you don't have your captions on, I have been told that people won't see your captions when you're speaking unless you have them turned on. So if you are a speaker, it'd be awesome if you could do that. Ashley, you are next.
I think actually Danny was first and then it was me.
No, go ahead. I'd love to hear your take first.
Oh, so I was going to say my AirPods died, so hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I was going to say that the skill that I used the most that I was not expecting was empathy. So in management, it comes in handy a lot, but I get this a lot where like the brilliant jerks were kind of succeeding in this industry, and now we sort of care about people and their feelings. And I care deeply about my team, and I'm very transparent with them. And I think that empathy is an underutilized skill in this industry still.
So for me on my side, I think one of the best things that I learned, especially when it came to cooking chicken and working in the gas station, was that chicken recipe that we came up with was not the correct recipe on the first try. And I think so many developers, they always try to get the most perfect application the first go around. And they halt themselves from ever releasing anything. What they don't sometimes realize is your favorite app is not on version 1. It's on version like 2.2 point whatever. Like they've made tons of fixes. They fixed tons of bugs. Sometimes just shipping the thing and improving upon the process as you go is way better than holding that application from release for 5 years, right? Sometimes you're going to learn a lot just by going through the process, by iterating, improving processes, and perfection comes through constant trial, error, and iterations. And I think that's one thing that I'm grateful I learned beforehand instead of holding myself back on one idea, trying to make it perfect before a human being ever sees it. Sometimes less than perfect will get you exactly where you want to be, and you can improve upon that.
I was going to say that I've heard that phrase, perfect is the enemy of good. I think it's interesting because one of the two main skills I think I learned in the Marine Corps that I was able to bring into tech is first crisis management, kind of dealing with things when everything goes sideways and your learning system or observability dashboard lights up, and then you have to figure out what's going on and triage things to kind of figure out what's important and what's not. The biggest thing I think I learned though is that it doesn't kind of matter what's in the run book or how it's supposed to work on paper. Is that often it doesn't work that way. When you're actually doing the thing, and being able to accept and adjust to that. That helped me out, especially working with other teams and working with other organizations, where sometimes you had to just kind of go walk over there or send an email and say, hey, I know whatever the protocol is, but let's talk about this real quick so we can both be on the same page and get this thing done. And that has helped out a lot, coming from an operational background and coming from customer facing backgrounds as well.
So one of the things you do with an audio degree, well, a couple of places you can go is into the studio where you're working in like sound booth with the mixer and the band and all that. And the setup process for that is a whole bunch of cables and instruments and microphones and cords plugged into various inputs and outputs. Or you could be on a live sound stage, which is the same thing in a band and long runs of cables. And the biggest thing you're going to run into is audio signal not getting from where it's supposed to be to where it's supposed to go, or getting there in a degraded manner where audio quality is bad or something like that. So the first thing you learn is just be able to basically debug where those problems might be occurring. Be able to kind of like dissect the problem in half, figure out like, am I getting audio to here? Great, I am. Am I getting audio to here? Great, I am. Or maybe where that signal degradation might be coming from. So one of the first times I got into really doing like any program at all, had this, again, simple CMS that had some basic templates kind of baked into it for like an image gallery or something like that. I was pretty easily able to get in there, figure out like, well, if I started tinkering and toying with this templating language that I really didn't even understand, I could start changing it. I can start changing those outputs by understanding the the various inputs and how those inputs get processed and actually get to the output, the finished stage. And it was that understanding the process from end to end, understanding kind of the order of events and where things start, where things go next, where things end, how to modify and manipulate things as that process goes. And taking that understanding of basic signal flow and process and where you might, how you might be able to debug when things are going wrong. I was literally just doing that today, where I'm writing some new code, trying to transfer some code over. It's definitely broken, but I can figure out, okay, I can get halfway through to here. At this point, things are working as expected. And it's just like audio production and trying to figure out what chords are unplugged on a stage. It's the same type of problem solving skills being used over and over again in different applications.
So I just want to say that everyone on this Spaces is super dope. But Danny, I've really enjoyed your answers. They're super thoughtful. So I just wanted to say that out loud.
I am stoked to be on this panel with everybody, and I just wanted to express that. Danny, you are awesome, and I'm not trying to downplay that. I just am excited about it. I was going to say, because I didn't actually answer any of the questions, that the thing that surprised me the most about transitioning into tech in general feeds into the skill that surprised me the most, which was that I was dead convinced that I was unemployable. And I think the biggest surprise for me was that I actually was employable, and that a lot of the things that I was worried would make me too weird or too loud or like too wrong, too queer, like whatever, to be in tech have ended up being really good in my transition into tech. That actually, like, my ability to know how to organize people, the ways that, like, if I'm in a meeting where people are going around in circles, like, I can distill that into the point. Things that I was afraid would get me laughed out of the room have actually been really valuable skills for me. And instead of making me unemployable and being the things that have been barriers, those have actually been strengths. And so if anybody is listening who feels that way, they might be strengths for you too. Because, like, if you don't think that what you bring to the table makes you valuable, that might actually be the valuable things that you bring to the table.
I definitely want to echo what Ian said, that I think for many people who have that doubt as to whether they can do the job, It's been my experience that the actual, typing of code into a keyboard is the smallest part of the actual job of tech. Most of it is teamwork. Most of it is learning. Most of it is problem solving. Most of it is just looking at, or I'm sorry, making good decisions. And in order to do that, you have to have a wealth of experience. You have to have different viewpoints, and you have to have different sets of experiences. So that way you can say, hey, I think this is a good idea, and here's why. Or like, I appreciate that idea, but I don't think that's going to work, and here's why. And far too long, tech was very homogenous. And sure, some things went well, but as tech has gotten more people in it from different backgrounds and different types of experiences, sets of experiences, it has made more products that work better for more folks. And we have been able to open doors for other people. So if you think that this is something I can't do, or I don't have an experience doing this, or no one else is kind of like me in there, I promise you, if you reach out, someone else has similar experiences or similar concerns that you do, and can at least kind of give you a hand or show you the ropes.
I find it absolutely hilarious and yet depressing that I used to give a keynote back in the before times during conferences that was literally about the importance of humor and entertainment in tech. Like, as someone with a creative arts background, I came into this world and a lot of folks will ask me, how do you think up these creative ideas for your apps and stuff like that? And it's literally my previous life as an artist. Like, everything that I have has either a sense of creativity or a sense of humor to it. And I think so much of that, even when it comes to talks, we have a coworker who recently passed away, Abel, who did this amazing talk with one of our coworkers, Jessica Dean. And I'll never forget it because it was this really technical, in-depth talk. And halfway through, they had wigs of each other's hair and they switched the wigs. And it was, these memory hooks, like things that make us laugh or things that pull an emotional heartstring, very similar to things, that we see in the performing arts and theater, are very memorable and help people retain the information more. So I always get so excited when I see folks from creative backgrounds or, folks like Val who are coming into this industry from, be it performing arts or visual arts or whatever that may be, and really be able to put a different view and a spin on these, we all learn very, very in-depth technical topics, and being able to make those accessible and entertaining and fun is truly a skill that I think is severely undervalued in this industry.
I think one thing that really comes from, especially creative arts, being my background, is the ability to create something out of nothing. And that's come in so handy for me as a marketer. And I mean, I spent a decade as a consultant where I literally every single day created something out of nothing, and looking for the next client, and working on projects that I'd never done before. And even now I'm a customer evangelist, which uh, is not a commonly held position. It's a little baffling as I try to grow my team, and can't really find like similar positions to my talent acquisition team. It doesn't know what to do with me and my team because they don't know how to tier new team members or how to pay scale or any of it, because it just doesn't exist at all. And it's not daunting to me because I spent so much time creating something out of nothing. And I think I actually prefer to do that. I don't think I would have enjoyed walking into a position where everything is prescriptive, and my day to day was set out for me, and I maybe even filling someone else's shoes. What I love about what I do now is that I really am building it as I go. And a lot of conversations we have are like, well, what is the dream? And then we'll work backwards from there, which is incredibly liberating and scary at the same time. But I also know I've done it a million times over in my previous career.
So I like that the barrier to entry into tech is lower now. I like that you don't have to have a CS degree to be here. I think going back to some of the things I wish I knew, um, this is one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. It's difficult being here. And so I don't want people listening to think that oh, it's easy. Anyone can do it. Chloe was in theater and now she's in tech. Ashley was a photographer and now she's in tech. It must be easy. I remember having a conversation with my uncle last year. He sent me a Facebook message and he said, "Hey, can you teach your cousin how to code? She wants to get into tech and make what you're making." And I'm like, bruh, I can't just, no. Like, if she can put in the work, absolutely. This is work. And I do not want to mislead anyone that's listening. It's hard work.
It is really hard work, and you get out of it what you put in. I had a thing to say, and I've completely forgotten what it is. Yep. Chloe has her hand raised.
I'll also say that, one of the challenges, in addition to all of the fun imposter syndrome, and I mean, I was the only woman in my Hackbright class that when they were talking about STEM, I literally needed to secretly like Google it on my phone because I was like, what are they talking about? Botany? Like, what is STEM? Like, I was so new to this world. And I think a lot of folks don't understand kind of the emotional overhead of folks who come into this industry from a non-traditional background, and they're not only fighting all of these stereotypes. I mean, I've seen it improve quite a bit since, 6 years ago when I was applying for jobs. Even the job descriptions say equivalent experience or boot camp, okay. But back then, I remember going to apply for a job, I think at Asana, and they were like, "Oh, we don't interview boot camp grads anymore because we had a bad experience," which is literally like saying we interviewed a 5'2" blonde lady before, and it didn't go well. I'm super happy to report that Asana now on their job description says boot camp or similar experience applies. But I think that there's a lot of in addition to all of these barriers, like I don't have a CS degree on my resume, and all my jobs before were retail and childcare and theater. But in addition to that, you're coming into this industry kind of having to prove yourself in a lot of these companies. I certainly, when I started out at a lot of the companies that I worked at, it was kind of like, well, who's this girl? Like, who's she walking in here with this theater degree? She just thinks she can act her way into a DevRel position. So there's always sort of that overhead, hanging over you of like, do I belong here? As a woman on the internet, I'm constantly getting told, be it through Reddit or 4chan or my DMs even, or my comments on YouTube, that like I'm a fake, I'm a phony. So I think always keep that in mind, especially when you're mentoring or onboarding, or even if you are someone coming into this industry. There's a lot of emotional overhead of being like, okay, do I actually belong here? Like, where is my place in this industry? And I just want to say, for anybody who's considering a career change or is like, oh my gosh, I I work at a video game or comic book store, this is something that really can be a kind of a heavy burden to carry.
Tim
Chloe,
has...
that's your audition trauma talking.
And so true.
Tim,
I also wanted to just
hold on a second, Val. Sorry, Val. I just want to make sure everyone knows that we're using the hand raising feature.
Oh, yeah.
You can find it down below. I saw Tim's had his hand up for a while, so I want to make sure that we go in order. Thanks.
Appreciate that. I wanted to kind of expand on one thing that Chloe did mention around interviewing, and just so that everyone knows that there are a lot of really bad and frankly toxic interview processes out there in tech. And I will say it's an artifact of an old industry, but it's still being used. So when you look at transitioning into tech, please understand that if you have bad interviews, even several bad interviews, it's probably not you. All right. The whiteboarding and these all day long things, excursions where they're going to bring you in and then tire you mentally and physically and fit you for culture fit, make you do coding tests. There are all these things that you will still find in tech that are really not great ways to evaluate how you will be as an employee. And so you need to go in there with open eyes and understand that yes, you may have these interviews and you may even bomb those interviews. And I'll tell you what, I've bombed many of those interviews, but it's not you. All right. So the best way to do is to talk to the recruiter, talk to folks that work there, talk to other folks in your industry or mentors about what the interview process is, and just so you can get some good familiar experience. But please don't let bad interviews discourage you, right? You have to, if it's something that you really want to do, understand that yes, they are tiring and yes, they are emotionally exhausting, but you can still set those aside and look for a good org with a good culture that doesn't do those kind of trivia-based toxic interviews.
Danny, you're up next.
No, I think Val was next, and then I can go after Val.
Oh, that's okay. I actually don't see the hand raise feature, so I'm so sorry for interrupting earlier. But I just wanted to say that I too Google everything, and I feel like it was very liberating when I learned that everybody Googles everything. I had a lot of that kind of imposter syndrome too, of like, if I have to Google it, like, why do I not know what these marketing acronyms mean? And I thought I would have to sit down and study these things all the time, but realizing that it's a type in my browser bar away from knowledge is just, it's so liberating. It's like so basic, but it also feels very huge to know that 90% of everyone's jobs is just Googling what the heck they're doing.
So, a couple things that I just want to say. The process and coding is hard. I talk about this quite often because I think it doesn't get enough highlight. And many people have always said in the past, like, coding is easy, you should pick it up. Coding is hard. Like, and I think for me, it's understanding that the code is usually just a tool to get to what it is that you're trying to do, and it's solving a problem. And so for me, I don't really have like a favorite language. I love them all. I love every language, every framework. As long as it's the right tool to solve the right problem, that's what I want to use. And for me, kind of going to Chloe's point, I've had 4chan come after me a couple times as well. And for me, if 4chan is agreeing with me, that means I'm doing something wrong. So I love it when they come after me. It means I'm on the right road to where I need to be. If they agree with me, I'm doing something wrong that I need to reevaluate. So one thing that I'll say also, interview process, it's not fun for anyone. I've met geniuses in this field that have had bad interviews, and I've met complete beginners that have bad interviews. I've had a ton of bad interviews. And I think one thing that people need to realize is the interview doesn't define who you are as a developer. What is going to define you is how you respond to that situation and grow from it.
I used to host boot camp office hours. Originally, I wanted to name it boot camp support group hours at the Microsoft Reactor. And one of the most interesting things that I found from gathering all these folks, we would do like an hour or two during the daytime, and I'd kind of take a survey of like, okay, who needs whiteboarding practice? Who, who just wants to talk about like the crazy interviews they had? And some of them were self-taught, some of them were boot camp folks, but it was fascinating because oftentimes I would have, folks come up to me afterwards, emotional and in tears and saying, thank you so much for hosting this. I've been, studying on my own, or, it's been 3 months after my boot camp and I haven't really been talking to anyone. And I had no idea that you have to learn how to interview in this industry. And that's really something I try to get across to everyone that I mentor and everyone that I talk to who's coming into this industry, is every interview that I had before coming into engineering was handing over my resume and saying, hi, I'm a nice person, please hire me. And as long as you didn't tell the person, like, go F yourself, like, you were going to get the job, right? Like all my retail, interviews, all my office manager interviews, executive assistant stuff, recruiting. So telling people like, hey, this is something you need to learn. Like I probably did 10 or 11, on-site interviews before I finally felt comfortable with it. I even say this to the students that I work with who have computer science degrees, like, this is not an easy industry to interview in. So I would also just, on that same note, give the advice that if you are doing this alone, make sure that you have a mentor, and B, just a support group, someone else who's either going through this, or a group of folks, be it your boot camp people that you went with, or if you didn't like the people in your boot camp, maybe find like a local meetup or support group, so to speak, because all of these folks who would come to these office hours always walked away saying, basically, I thought I was alone. I thought it was just me. I thought I was stupid. And I think the more that I talked to people when I was going through, because I'll say the highs are very high and the lows are extremely low when you are going through your first round of interviews for a junior eng role. So I think it's important to say, just as far as what Ashley said, I too get those messages from folks that are like, teach my brother how to code or teach your cousin how to code. And it's like, no, this isn't some get rich quick, go to the boot camp and you get the job thing. There's a lot of work to put in. And if everybody could do it, everyone would do it. But I think Ian said the last time that we held this spaces that, people who are self-taught or do a boot camp should honestly just have a badge of honor, because this stuff is not easy. And making sure that you have, your mental health in order and a support group and people to talk to, I think is really key in that process.
For anybody who heard that and was like, oh no, I don't have my mental health in order, I would like to assure you that you do not have to have perfect mental health to work in tech. A lot of us don't.
I certainly do not.
I have a couple of things from messages that I have received about questions or comments. There is a comment from Paige saying, oh, also don't forget to add how one doesn't need elite skills to be a part of things. People can find friends and groups where people want to help them, even though all they can contribute is positivity or fun conversation. That's way more valuable, in my opinion, than any professional network. And I would argue that that can be a professional network. That can be one way that that looks. A question that I got that I like a lot is, what is the biggest eye-opener you had after transitioning to a new career? What shocked you the most about your new field? I'll start, which is I thought that everybody had it completely together, because clearly people who were in this field were like fancy grown-ups who had it together, and I was no such thing. And I got here and discovered that, in fact, this field is full of people who don't feel like they have it together either. And in a lot of cases, they're people who don't. So that was a surprise to me that, like, actually I was much more qualified than I thought I was, and that everybody else is also three raccoons in a trench coat. Jamila has her hand up, and then Ashley, I think.
I'm going to say the one thing that surprised me the most is that when you are ready to start interviewing, coming in and you start asking the questions, and a lot of the answers were, it depends. It depends on the team, it depends on the company. And I thought people were being intentionally vague, but the reality is it's the truth. And you have to do the work up front to figure out where is going to be best for you. You can't just say, these are the companies I want to work for, and then just dive headfirst into it. That's a good start, but you got to do the rest of the work and reach out to people and talk to people and be ready to give instead of just take. It's not transactional, it's relationship.
I will double down on what Ian said. None of us have it together. And I have this conversation with my daughter a lot, who just graduated college. And she's like, at what point does like somebody know what they're doing? And I'm like, oh no, never, never. And the higher I get on the leadership chain, like that is absolutely true. Every time I get a promotion, I'm like, surely somebody at this level knows what they're doing, right? Nope, we're all just doing our damn best.
I would say the biggest, like, what the was going to a larger company like Microsoft and learning about leveling. I was like, wait a second, what are these numbers and why are they different at every single company? And obviously, there's websites and stuff to figure out what level you're at, but there's all these sort of unspoken rules and, things in place that I had no knowledge on before entering this industry. And again, I'm super lucky that my partner is a very senior dev and I can ask him questions, but I always try to make sure with folks I mentor that there's all these gotchas, right? Like negotiating. I never negotiated as an actress. I would also say another thing that was kind of a surprise. Oh, I totally lost it. I will raise my hand again if I remember. I need to take my Adderall.
Ashley, and then I have another question from the audience.
Yeah, to add on to that, is there something that you were embarrassed you didn't know how to do when you first joined this industry? I'll start. I remember in my first week, I had to go to the admin and be like, somebody asked me to send them a meeting invite, and I don't know how to do that in Outlook. And it was so embarrassing. She was like, what do you mean you don't know how to send a meeting invite? Uh, like those are real things that happen.
I was really embarrassed that I didn't know anything about money stuff, like at all. Like I didn't know what a 401k was. I didn't know anything about stocks or anything like that. And I needed to sign up for these things off the top, and I had absolutely no idea how to do it. Somebody raised their hand, and now it's gone. I'm not sure who that was. A question from the audience is, there's a lot of talk in this space about how things can be hard for people who don't have traditional tech or CS backgrounds. What do we think that people can do who do come from traditional tech and CS backgrounds to make things more welcoming and inclusive for people who are coming in from other kinds of backgrounds and places?
I would say if you are going to interview someone that you know is coming in from a, self-taught or a boot camp background, know that going in, there's going to be a lot of different things here, right? Like most folks who've gone to a boot camp have maybe one project that they did for their final project. They probably, maybe have some open source contributions. But something that I super appreciated at a lot of places that I interviewed was, I would do some interviews and they'd be like, hey, do this take home challenge in Ruby. And I'd be like, great, my boot camp was Python and JavaScript. And I would tell them that, and then they'd be like, we're going to do the entire whiteboarding challenge in Ruby. And it's like, oh, great. I don't know that language, but I will do my best. So a lot of places that I interviewed, I super appreciated versus whiteboarding, walking through my final project with me, maybe even finding a bug in it and pair programming on it together, which honestly, at the end of the day, is a much more kind of accurate situation to what you will be doing on the job. I remember the thing that I forgot. It used to drive me crazy that I would ask people when I was, starting out in this career, like, what's your day to day like? Like, what do you do on an average day? And no one could answer that question for me. And now that I work in this industry, I totally understand it. But yeah.
Micah has his hand up next, and then Ashley.
Yeah, thank you. With the interview process, I had a couple of really good experiences when I interviewed at Microsoft, which is probably the only reason I lucked out and got a job I probably wasn't fully qualified for. One of them was when we did do like a whiteboarding challenge, which typically does suck. That when I did it, though, it honestly was a good experience and that it was very collaborative. The person I worked with, who I ended up working really closely with for the next 4 years, was one that did it, and like he would just ask questions, I'd respond. He'd ask a question, I'd respond, and so it was a really collaborative process. And then when I got the job and worked with him, I spent so much time at that same whiteboard with him, doing that same thing. Putting something up, asking a question, making a change, asking a question. So just being really true to like what actual work is like, and not just putting someone through some hoops. And then secondly, I got to the position I applied for was officially in the design department. It was a design developer, but I was the developer, the design systems and whatnot. And so it got to a part where they're like, this is the part of the interview where you're supposed to show your portfolio. And I'm like, I don't really have a portfolio. I'm not a traditional designer. And I asked them, well, could I give you a talk? I had a talk I'd put together several months prior about design systems. And I was like, hey, this is 45 minutes. I could give you this talk and kind of walk you through what I think about design systems and how I present them and think about them and rationalize about them. And they're like, sure, that'd be great. So instead of doing something that I didn't have at all, that would have completely failed on, I was able to go in probably with my strongest possible things of a talk I prepared, I'd done before, that showed my strengths and showed my expertise. And I think that was really the seller, having that opportunity to have some flexibility in that in the interview process, to do things that highlighted my knowledge rather than just whatever their standard routine was that you had to do. So flexibility, huge part.
To answer the question about how folks with CS degrees can help people with non-traditional backgrounds, I did a bunch of open courseware as I was learning. And like the reality is when you have a CS degree, there's shit that was important and then there was shit that you never use. And it would have been cool for me to be able to do a Google search and know like, hey, what was useful when you were getting your CS degree? Like, what is it that you needed the most? I would love for somebody to break that down. Even still, I would love that.
Nobody has their hand raised if anyone wants to say anything.
Do we have another question?
Yeah, let's go into the question box. Somebody said I'm going to paraphrase this because it's not exactly what was asked, but trying to transition from a tech adjacent field to a pure tech field. I have 5+ years experience. I'm told that I should apply for senior roles, but I've been told by people I'm applying to that I'm too junior. What gives? How do I bridge the gap? Ashley has her hand raised.
I mean, I can only speak for myself here. I don't know that person's background really, but when I entered tech, I took whatever job anyone would give me, and sort of built from there. I knew that my background was not traditional, and I felt super lucky that anyone was willing to take a chance on me.
One way that I think you could go about bridging the gap is because I think that that's a fairly specifically phrased question, and I didn't actually paraphrase it at all, actually. But paraphrased, I think the question is like, if I have a lot of work experience in other fields, but I don't have a lot of work experience in tech, where am I on the sort of junior, senior, like kind of spectrum? And I think one way that people can speak to this is when I first went into tech, I was like, I have no resume. Like, I have nothing that is useful here. And that wasn't really true because I did have skills that were transferable, and I had more skills that were transferable than I thought. And so one way that you can start to bridge that is by being able to tell your story and speaking to the skills that you're transferring in a way that is going to be applicable to the jobs that you're applying to. I think that is sort of it can be a kind of tricky thing to try to figure out how to navigate, but I really think it can help a lot because you're not coming in with nothing. You're coming in with a wealth of skills and life experience and work experience. And, you actually did not fall off the turnip truck yesterday. And so I think, own the skills and knowledge that you've got and be able to speak to those, I think helps a lot. Micah has his hand up.
Yeah, one interesting thing you'll find, it kind of depends on the organization. In previous orgs where it's more like an agency and whatnot, coming in as a senior is really helpful because it gets you a little further up on the ladder, and oftentimes it takes a while to kind of make that movement. A very different experience though, like a company like Microsoft, partially because when you come in at a senior level, you're expected to work at the level comparable to other seniors around you, and that's how your rewards are established. That's how your promotions are established. So coming in at a senior level, especially if you're new to tech or new to that org or new to large organizations, it can be actually really challenging and disadvantageous because you're going to come in and be expected to work at the same level as people that have been there for 10 years and kind of know the system and know how to get work done in that environment. So it's in some cases, it's kind of good to come in at maybe a step down from where you think you could be, knowing that you're going to shine at that point. You're going to perform incredibly well at that level and be able to get really good rewards and good reviews and make that jump back up to senior a lot faster. So I think that's kind of one of those aha things as well that I got when I first joined Microsoft, is realizing that getting that higher level and coming in at a higher level is sometimes actually kind of bad. And sometimes you want to come in a little bit lower so that you can, kind of under promise and over deliver in those cases.
Jamila is next.
I can second that of what Micah just said. I transitioned into tech later in life, so I had a whole career and managed to push through a few ceilings myself. But coming in, I had to check my pride a little bit at the door as far as what I wanted to come in at and versus what I was ready for. So it's a check with yourself to understand that you are doing something completely new and you do have experience that brings you to the table, but give yourself some additional time to learn how you're applying what you know from your previous career to what you're doing now.
I'm getting a lot of questions about degrees. And is a degree useful? How is a degree useful? How do you even get a job without a degree if you're self-taught? Like really, literally, how do you do this? And that's a big topic, and we have 8 more minutes. So I'm wondering if people want to start to tackle the question of how does one prove experience without schooling, which is maybe one that we can all attempt to tackle in this period of time, and maybe degrees is a topic for next time, if people are up for that. Oh, everybody has their hands up at once. I don't know. Tim, my bad.
So, and like my story is like many of others on the speaker panel. I do not have a degree. When I came in, proven experience was a little bit different than it is now. I transitioned to tech in the late '90s, and they were pulling people in. But that said, I've watched the transition of the roles going from obviously where you had to have a software engineering degree or computer science degree to become a developer or programmer to a point where it is possible to prove your experience without that. The open source projects, GitHub, commits and contributions, and other community activity outside of an actual professional job. To show that you actually know what you're doing. So I feel like there are projects out there that you can contribute to show your experience that don't necessarily match up with a spot on your resume.
Danny.
Thank you for letting me speak on this. So to give you guys and give everyone a good idea, I've helped over 600 people land their first jobs in tech in the last year and a half. And for me, I have 4 steps when it comes to landing a job in tech, especially whether you have a degree or not. The very first one is LinkedIn. You need to kind of stand out where they hang out. All the hiring managers and recruiters and decision makers for businesses are on LinkedIn. To give you an idea, LinkedIn has 675 million monthly users, of which 90 million are those decision makers. If they were hanging out at a bar, I tell you to go hang out at that bar. Well, they're hanging out on LinkedIn. If you make a strong profile and you set it up in a way that really helps you stand out, a lot of the times that profile will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It will start opening up those conversations. It will start ranking you higher in certain search results. That LinkedIn profile is going to do a lot more good for you than traditional resumes may even do for you. And step number 2 on that is your projects. Now, when I say project, I mean projects that you have. Your projects don't need to be 50 different projects and you need to be making a project every single day to showcase your skill. You need maybe 1 or 2 that could be talking points that you're going to use in an interview and in a conversation with a hiring manager, technical manager, that showcases your technical ability, but it also kind of gives you added items that you can put on your resume to showcase, hey, I don't have experience, right? I don't have experience in this role, but I've used applicable skills in projects using these things right here and explaining how you've utilized that thing. Step number 3 is a portfolio site. Now, I'm not saying your portfolio site has to be technical. I don't care if you use a template on it. But one thing that I try to stress is try to make it appealing to the eye. And the reason why is the vast majority of recruiters or the base hiring managers, right? I'm not talking about technical managers or the people that are going to decide the role. The first, what I call the gatekeepers of that role, right? They're given a job description. They've never written a line of code a day in their life. And they're trying to source a candidate to fill a role. They don't know the difference between React and Angular. They don't know the difference between back and front end. They just know that they have a list of requirements that they're trying to fill. They're going to trust a site that looks at least appealing. They're like, oh, this person probably does what they're doing. And they're going to pass that site on to the technical manager that is actually going to start looking at maybe your GitHub and things like that. But when you put your projects on your portfolio site, you're basically controlling what it is that they see first. Because a lot of times if someone's exploring your GitHub, they may not be looking at the projects that you want them to see first. Maybe they're looking at some empty repos. Maybe they're seeing some projects that you may not have wanted to show off that you were just practicing in. Keeping those top little projects on your resume and your portfolio site kind of controls that narrative a little bit. The last thing is step number 4 is your resume. Now, here's one thing that a lot of people miss when they apply to jobs. They don't adjust their resume based on the job description that they're looking at. They use one resume and they're mass applying. And the problem is a lot of people don't realize most hiring managers and companies use a software called ATS software, automatic tracking software. Based on this software, they're looking for a certain threshold of keywords that are being matched. If you're not matching that certain threshold, let's say 80% of your resume should be matching this thing, right? If you're not matching these metrics, a human being never even sees that piece of paper. So adjusting that resume based on the description increases your rate of actually being seen by another human being. The other thing is when you're talking about your job experiences, we know what it is that your basic job duties are. And for example, let's say you were a cashier before. Don't tell me rang up customers, bag groceries. We know you did that. Matter of fact, I'd be more shocked if you didn't use a cash register. Tell me your quantifiable achievements. What did you do? You were there at that job for 3 years, right? You didn't keep that job for 3 years because you just showed up to work on time. What did you do? Did you help increase customer satisfaction? Did you help increase upsells at the return of customer? Did you help reduce spoilage? Did you help reduce turnover? What it is that you did to show someone somewhere that you're great at your job, that you deserve these paychecks and you got those raises? What was it? Talk about them. The problem is a lot of people, when it comes to their resume, they talk about like their basic job duties, never highlighting the fact that you've done some amazing things there. And one thing that I try to tell people all the time is keep like a little notebook beside you and write down small wins or big wins, because that small win on a resume can sometimes seem big. And we often forget those real nice wins. And we're only thinking, well, I didn't get a $10,000 raise this year, so I don't know what I can really talk about as a win. Those small wins genuinely add up. Talk about them. Those are the hooks to get you into the doors to the opportunities that you genuinely want.
So Tim and Danny really gave you the playbook there, but the only other thing that I will add is confidence. And I say that not so confidently because every morning I get up and I have to convince myself that I belong in the same room as, I'm going to pick on her because I see her, Tess. At no point has Tess ever come for me, but I still compare myself to folks in this industry. So when I go into those interviews, um, I am really putting on a face. I am confident as hell when I am in there. Fake it till you make it sometimes.
I want to emphasize the idea that Danny mentioned about getting yourself in front of a human is incredibly important. And there are a lot of ways to get yourself in front of a human. You can do that by volunteering at conferences. You can do that by going to meetups or being involved in community stuff, either locally or virtually. You can do that by having a presence on this site or other places. There are lots of ways to get in front of a person, and it really is a lot about networking in this industry. And so if you can if you can get to know people and, just show yourself and who you are and what you can do, that can really help a lot. I want to point out that we are at time, and I believe that we were thinking about making this into a series, possibly weekly. And so I would like to be respectful of people's time because it's been an hour, and I would like to nominate somebody for next time. Um, Chloe or Danny, how do you two feel about that?
I'll run my mouth all day long if you give me the time.
All right, it's on you next.
All right. Cool. So, Danny, if you're up for organizing the next one, that would be awesome. We can send you the info. And everybody who spoke, thank you for coming and speaking on our panel here. And everybody who listened, thank you for coming and listening. You got this. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's not too late. And we'll see you later. Bye.